Welcome. How are you? If you can see me now on the YouTube video, it means that you're doing your online training or distance training because of that rotten virus going around everywhere. So everyone stay safe, stay healthy, look after yourself, look after your family and your residents, and we'll get through it together. But meantime, there's a few things which sadly or gladly has to happen, and that's your obligation to comply with New South Wales Health, and they require that every calendar year that every staff member, that includes management, even gardening staff, cooking staff, has to carry out what they call mandatory all staff training. Okay, so look, my name's Trevor from Hotfire Training Services. A lot of you have probably met me. Looking forward to seeing you in person again. It's a shame we can't see one another in person. I am a person who loves the face-to-face training. My background is Fire Brigade, a lot of years in New South Wales Fire Brigade, and I've been doing this training face-to-face for a few years now, and only in healthcare is what I enjoy doing most, because that's the one where everyone has to do their training but everyone's part of the same team, and that's looking after residents, or in the case of hospitals, patients, people who can't look after themselves, and we all have to be on the same page when it comes to what to do in an emergency situation. So look, you'll receive all the answers through this video. I need you to have your pack in front of you, your learning pack, and as you can see, it's been written out with a fictitious name. You need to fill in your name here, the facility's name, in other words where you work, the address and the date that you'll be doing this. Down here are some instructions for your manager or your educator, whoever's organising this training at your end, to gather all of the completed workbooks up and to send them in one go back to Hotfire Training Services, Post Office Box 400, Toukley, New South Wales 2263. Okay, let's go to page 2, which this video is not going to help you. This is more information about where you work, so I need you to fill this one in, because this will be coming back to me, and it proves to me that not only do you work at your facility, you also understand and realise there's a lot of fire equipment, emergency equipment installed for your safety, and what to do in an emergency. There could even be signage. So this here will cover all of that equipment. I need you to look at it to understand what it looks like, what it does and what it's used for, and in some cases how to use it. So this will be talking about things, the different types of extinguishers, so I need you to put a yes or a no, a tick or a cross there if you have them. So up here, once again, your name, employer's name, workplace address, and I need to know number of levels or floors. So if you have an underground car park, that's a level. How many areas or zones on your fire panel? You will have to go to your main fire panel, which usually is in the reception or the entrance area, and look how many sections, or what we call zones, there are, and your role in an emergency control organisation will be a staff member. In other words, you do have a role to play. So here's the equipment down here. There's other equipment which you may or may not have. You should have a lot of it. Even goes down to emergency procedures, so that could be your flip chart on the wall, we'll talk about later, or emergency procedures, which will be written up by management and updated at least every 2 years in case something does change. And last one, hazards on site, and that could include things as LPG. I want to know if you've got them, where the shut-off valves are, where they're located, even oxygen bottles. Not so much which rooms they're in, but where you store them. So there's a fair bit of information to write on there, and if you work in groups or teams or a classroom environment, more the merrier. You'll all get the correct answer, I'm sure of it, and that way we're all on the same page again. Okay, a little bit of information here, which is pretty much, if I was there face to face, this will be the handout you get. It's a synopsis or a summary of everything that your lecture would encompass. So the 2.5 hour lecture we have, yes, it includes some practical exercises, but usually it means a lot of theory, a lot of listening, a lot of looking, and all that information is encapsulated down here in one page. So look at that for your reference, and then have a look at some of the pictographs or the pictorials on how to do certain things. This page here we need filled out. Once again, it's location specific, so let me know what you do at your place, what you've got regards residents, patients, what your staff to resident ratios are. So this is more to do with where you work, and don't forget all of this has to be returned to me via your educator or manager. Which manager, educator, thank you very much. Okay, so we go into the equipment, and this is what we, in face-to-face, we may even walk around, have a look at the equipment, we'll demonstrate the equipment, and we'll even go over it with one another. So you need to fill in each page. So let's look at the first piece of equipment. It is the carbon dioxide extinguisher. So that's the only extinguisher we're concerned with. So you may have to listen to everything I'm about to say, because you'll find what I'm saying will include all of your answers for this page. Okay everybody, this here is a carbon dioxide extinguisher. Just by looking at it, we know it's a carbon dioxide extinguisher because it is red cylinder with a black band. It has a large nozzle, and it's also written on the label. The one I've got in my hand is not as big as the ones you have at work. So the size we'll have in the workplace are 3.5 kilo, and we know it hasn't been used because not this one here, but the plastic tie. So we can assume it hasn't been used. And what would we use it for? Just about any type of fire. Very versatile. As a matter of fact, carbon dioxide extinguisher is the only extinguisher recommended for healthcare. That's the one. That's the one which you can even use around people who have life support, and it won't harm them. It's the one that in an operating theatre you could use. It's not going to harm people. But do not point it at people. Do not hang on to the nozzle, because it has got a freezing property which is very similar to dry ice, and you may get burnt. So how to use it? It's the same as any extinguisher. It has a 4-letter acronym, PASS, which stands for pass. Doesn't mean we pass it over. It means we would pull the pin. We would test it, of course. We would aim at the fire, like so, and we would squeeze the trigger and sweep side to side. So that's how we use it. Now the one you'll have at work, the 3.5 kilo, is good for about 11 to 15 seconds. Now that doesn't sound a long time, but it's long enough for you in front of a fire. I'm not here to give you education in becoming a firefighter, not at all. But your quick response to an emergency, like a small fire with an extinguisher, I can guarantee you could be preventing a tragedy and maybe even loss of life. So knowing how to use it, knowing where to use it, and what it actually does is very important. There's carbon dioxide extinguisher on just about any type of fire, except the main type of fire, which, well, the most common type of fire that people have in their home, and you'd have it in the workplace as well, is in the kitchen. We'll talk about what we use on that one shortly. But where would we find these extinguishers? Definitely we'd have one near the fire panel. In other words, if you're investigating an alarm, you can take it with you. Work in teams of at minimum 2, don't go off on your own. And when you use the extinguisher, if it's in a room or an area, leave the area, shut the door, and lay the extinguisher down outside the door. That will then identify, not only to the firefighters or the emergency services, but other people that that's where the fire was or that's where it is. It's all about timing in fires. The quicker you can get to the fire itself, the better. So just by you putting that down in front of a door, whether you've used it or not, the firefighters will use that as a guide and get in there as quickly as possible, and hopefully a good result from all of it. They will also be in every what we call compartment. So every area that is bounded by smoke or fire doors, so when the alarm goes off they close, that is called a zone or a compartment or a section. There'll be at least one at each end of the corridor. That way you're not having to run, walk or quickly walk a long way to get one of these extinguishers. So they're all over the building, in other words. And the funny thing is, you will notice them from now on. So let's talk about the type of fire, which is pretty well the most common type of fire that the fire brigade attend in people's home. It's the oil fire. Oil, fat, dripping, call it what you like, in the kitchen. Very easy one to occur for a lot of reasons. Number one, oil, when it does ignite, it escalates fairly quickly, but also people tend to not sit there and look at the cooking, but maybe do something else at the same time, and suddenly the oil's on fire. Now, the old myths about removing it or throwing a blanket or water, don't do any of that. Okay, there's one thing and one thing only that could not only save your cooking, which is irrelevant, but your kitchen and your house and maybe even life, is by having on hand a fire blanket. Okay, so the fire blanket is the most important piece of equipment to have at home. You can use it on an oil fire or a small fire to pull the blanket out, cover the fire, and what you're doing, you're removing the oxygen from the triangle of fire. So the triangle of fire, you have three elements. We have oxygen, fuel and heat. Controlling one of those elements, there's a better triangle, is by removing or controlling one of those elements, and we can control the fire. So with the fire blanket, you're putting it over the fire, you're removing the oxygen. Now, oil is a tricky one in that once it ignites, it gets very hot, it starts to expand. So even though you've put the blanket over and you think the fire might be out, please leave it on for as long as you can, even call the emergency services out, and then they will remove it slowly because that oil can reignite. Once you've used the blanket, that's it, throw it away. You can only ever use it the once. It's made out of a fiberglass material, a woven fiberglass, and once you've used it, it'll have this black substance on it, which is called carbon or ash or soot, you may call it, and it is combustible. So throw it away and go and buy another one. Now, these are $10, maybe even cheaper sometimes at places like Aldi, and to me, they're the most important piece of firefighting equipment at home, along with a smoke alarm, the two essentials you need in your home. Because don't forget, that's where most of fire casualties occur, in the home. So there's your fire blanket, and like I said, pull it out, hold it in front of you, place it over the fire, leave it. If it's a gas stove, go and turn it off outside. At work there, you may have an internal shut-off valve. If it's electricity, well, maybe go and turn your power box off and call the emergency services. So, fire blanket. Okay, we're now going to look at some more equipment. We have an emergency exit sign. Here they are. They'll be the old type, which has got the word exit, or the new type, which has what we call a running man, and some of them have an arrow. Now, please understand this. They are very confusing if you don't know exactly what they mean. Now, an emergency exit sign is placed in prominent areas, usually above eye level. They're green in colour. They're operated by, or powered by normal power, but when that power goes out, there's a battery backup, which lasts minimum 90 minutes, but it's never going to get to that stage. So as long as they're illuminated, it's fine. Green, the colour itself, and you've probably heard me say this face to face, is medically, so it's a medical reason they're green. It's the last colour, even if you're colourblind, that you can make out before you drift into unconsciousness. So if you imagine an area full of smoke, we get under the smoke. We look through the smoke, we see a green sign, head towards the green light, because that's the one that will eventually lead you outside the building. Outside the building, maybe to your assembly area, but at least outside the building. But we have to know how to read these signs. So exit sign on its own with the word continues straight ahead. If this exit sign had an arrow, follow the arrow. So the newer signs will have a running man. The running man on his own continues straight ahead, so that one there is the same as that one, only change direction if the running man has an arrow. Don't follow the running man on his own, it needs to have an arrow to change direction. If you come across an arrow facing down, you'll probably find there's a staircase up ahead. And trust me when I say this, with thick smoke, you cannot see the hand in front of your face. That's how thick it is. It's like being blindfolded. Okay, let's talk about our emergency procedure flip chart. You'll have these in your building. This is what they'll look like. We have a hanging hook, and usually they're near the phones. So if you've got 25 phones, my advice, you need 25 of these. So all of the information you're going to need if you call the emergency services will be on the front of this flip chart. It'll have the name of the facility. It'll have the address, the cross street, a phone number. So in other words, as your mind is racing 100 miles an hour, it's funny what you forget when you're like that. This is here to guide you. So you're making the call, you look down here, there's the information for the emergency services. Then you'll have the different emergencies, which has a guide page. So we have such emergencies: medical emergency, missing resident, a fire emergency, internal emergency, external emergencies, bomb threats. Now the one for fire will have our main message of the day, which is our race message, which is remove, alert, confine, extinguish. So remove, alert, confine, extinguish. You can see it behind me there. That's our action in the event of fire. That's the only actions in the event of fire. Those 4 letters there represent everything that we may do in a fire emergency. There is nothing else. But if you've covered these 4 letters here, you've done your best to prevent loss of property and, more importantly, the loss of life in a fire emergency. So R for remove, you're removing people from the fire. It's all about people. Remove them, even if it means taking them out of a room. But in our case today, we'll talk about into the next area, which keeps them very safe before the fire brigade and emergency services arrive. A is alert. So alert means let people around the area know what's going on, but also alert the fire brigade. Alert the ambulance if you have to. But if you can give all of your message to the one emergency service, they will then share it with the other emergency services. C is for confine. As simple as shutting a door, and you're confining the fire and smoke from getting from one area to another. In other words, outside a room into the hallway, or outside a hallway into the next compartment. And E for extinguish, that's the word which we use in your industry, because the last thing we want you to do is evacuate outside the building. Extinguish, but only if safe enough to do so. If you think you can do it, but very, very conditional. Number 1, you've got to know how to use the equipment. Number 2, you need another staff member with you. Don't try it on your own. Number 3, make sure that if you're in front of a fire or some type of emergency where you're going to do something about it, have a plan B so that you can get out yourself. And number 4, probably the most important thing is, make sure that everybody's accounted for. Very important. So we have remove, alert, confine, extinguish. In what order? Doesn't matter. If you come across a fire today and there's an extinguisher, how about we extinguish first? Then we can alert other people. We can alert the fire brigade. We can then start removing people to safety. And then, last person out, shut the door. Shut the door. So those 4 actions are very important. It's a very, very common poster. So that's probably the most important thing that we're going to learn today. So our flip chart, it will be near the phones, hanging, and very easy to find. One of the emergencies it does cover is bombs. So I need you to pick up one of these, bring it in and write me some things out for your procedures, your emergency procedures for a bomb threat. Okay, so let's now go to your next page, smoke doors and fire doors. Well, they look pretty much the same, and the sign on it says fire safety door. But if we know a little bit more about these doors, it could make big differences in the decisions that we make when we start evacuating people. So evacuation, the word itself, please, it doesn't mean everybody out of the building. The word evacuate literally means the removal of people, so people, yourself, your contractors, and more importantly your residents, from one area to another. In other words, from a dangerous area to a safe area. So if there's a small fire or smoke emergency in a resident's room, you get them out of the room and shut the door. That's a stage 1 evacuation. Stage 2 would be if you decide, you know what, because those doors, which normally are open, have now closed, which then creates our compartments. Let's get everybody from the surrounding rooms into the next compartment. In other words, that a stage 2 evacuation is removing people from their rooms to the next compartment. We do have a priority of evacuation. Obviously, the people in the fire room or affected by fire, whatever, and closest, and then we have our priority of evacuation, which is ambulant. Now, an ambulant resident in a fire emergency is someone who can not only talk, but can understand instructions. So please, it's not just about physical, it's about understanding, the easiest to hardest actually. So we move ambulant. Semi-ambulant is somebody who requires assistance. Could be mentally, could be physically. Takes a little bit longer. Remove them into the next compartment. And then we have our non-ambulant, sorry about that, resident, which purely and simply is somebody who's confined to bed. In other words, to get them out of the room, you don't push the bed, okay? You don't drag the mattress out. If there's a little bit of smoke and you feel up to it and get them under the smoke, how about we do the blanket drag? Remove the blanket off the bed, lower the bed, even if your power's gone out, there's a manual lowering device. Get the resident onto the blanket. You've bought time by getting them under the smoke. Wrap the blanket around your hands, and then using your tummy, you probably can't see that, your abdominal muscles, drag them out of the room. It's a hard thing to do, but you know what? You've just saved a life, because that person couldn't even get out of their bed. So now we get to our last priority or evacuation classification. A resistive person. Somebody who's non-compliant. Someone who doesn't want to play ball. You've left them till last, for the simple reason they're going to be the hardest to get out. And let me tell you, once you've asked them a couple of times and they've understood what you've said, please, you must then leave them where they are. For the simple reason, if you go physically engaging with that person, you could become a victim yourself, or you may even find that they could become a victim. They could be bruised. So the thing is, ask them, make sure they understand what you're saying. If they're not going to come with you, that's fine. And you know what? By then you'll find emergency services are turning up at your front door, and via you communicating, could be your walkie-talkies, could be a deck phone back to the fire panel, to the emergency coordinator, let them know, yes, we have a resistive or a non-compliant resident in a certain area or a room. And the emergency services, their priority is life before property. They'll go to that person first. So we have everybody accounted for, except maybe, who else could be on site? We have contractors, and when I visit you, I'm a contractor. I have to actually sign in or log in. I have to note a time, the area I'm working, which company I work for, what I'm going to do. And that's good to know, because there's a lot of different type of contractors who come into your building. So just by picking up your sign-in book, which is usually near the front reception anyhow, you'll find you'll have the contractors. You may even have a visitor's book, which might be different. You may even have a volunteers book, same deal. You've got to know who's in the building, because when the emergency services do arrive, that's what they're more concerned with than anything else. The accounting of the people who are in the building, or for that case on site at the time of the emergency. So let's talk about how we would account for our residents. Now, our residents vary for the obvious reasons every now and then, but there's a record of residents' names and photos kept in a certain place. Where would that be? What's that you say? The evacuation pack. And here we go, our emergency evacuation pack. Inside here we'll have the different items we may use or may need in the time of an emergency. There'll be things like torches, walkie-talkies, even the white vest for the emergency coordinators. But the thing you need to produce to the emergency services is your folder, book, call it what you like, of the residents' names and photos. So this has to be updated. It has to be an up-to-date document, or what they call a live document. If it changes in any way, please change it as soon as possible. There'd be nothing worse than looking for people who aren't there, or what is even worse than that, not looking for people who are there. Okay, this should be kept somewhere easily accessible. Now, I know a lot of places have them in the nurses' station, maybe somewhere near the entrance, near the reception. That's fine. Maybe next to the fire panel, as long as everybody knows where it is, what it's used for and what's in there. So we'll have things like torches if the lights go out. We'll have a first aid kit. We'll have bottles of water, which is very important. We'll have the folder with the residents' names and photos, and we could have things in there like a fire blanket even, or a white vest, maybe even a couple of other items which we may use during an emergency. So that's your emergency evacuation pack. So there's our smoke and fire doors, which we started about. Smoke doors, they'll have a rubber around the edge, even if it has a sign on the door itself, fire safety door, a very generic title. If it's got rubber, and it'll be a smoke door. They have a minimum resistance time for a direct fire attack of 30 minutes. So 30 minutes minimum. Whereas a fire door, minimum 1 hour, but usually in healthcare 2 hours. So they will be located in places like maybe the kitchen, definitely the pan rooms, you'll have fire doors, and definitely if it's a multi-storey building, the fire staircase, so the stairwell, which is your fire escape. So the ones that are inside the building, which will then separate each zone, they are smoke doors, and they're the ones which, if we're going to enter this from one area to the other, our entry procedure would be back of the hand, which has more sensitive than the front, on the metal, and slowly open the door and head in. So it's the same procedure once you get into that compartment with the rooms. You need to test the door handle, the back of the hand. If it's too hot, don't go in. If it's just a little bit warm, realise that metal is a good conductor of heat. The back of your hand is very sensitive. There may be something going on in there that you could be able to handle. So just crouch down, open the door slowly. You've got your extinguisher with you. Why not go in and give it a go? So that's, believe it or not, a smoke door. It has the seals on it, and the sign will say fire safety door. Ignore that. This is a smoke door, and this is between each area within inside the building. Okay, so we now have our next sheet, which is our fire blanket. We've already been over that, and you'll get all of your answers from listening again to the early part, but I need to have all of these answered correctly. The only difference between the one I showed you, which is the one we have at home, is the size. So this one, which is the one you can buy at Bunnings or wherever for your $10, it's 1 metre by 1 metre. The ones we have at work are a minimum 1.5 metres by 1.5. Obviously it's a larger cooking area, and they would be located where? Definitely in the kitchen. You may even have them at the nurses' stations, but definitely in the kitchen. There's your fire blankets. Okay, fire safety questionnaire. We have some more things here. So what does the acronym RACE mean? Remove, alert, confine, extinguish. In what order? Any order. Depends on the situation. Question 2. From the following list, select 3 components of your early warning fire detection system. So fire detection, early warning. We would have fire bell, we would have smoke detector, and our electromagnets, which hold the doors open, so when the alarm goes off, the doors close. Question 3. If there was an electrical storm and the power to the building is cut, will your fire detection system remain operational? The answer is yes, because in the fire panel itself there is a small compartment down below which will have a backup battery. So that may or may not look like your fire panel. It'll have your zones, areas next to it, your fire panel as you can see, and this is what you're reading off up here. So the panel itself, red light, indicates a fire alarm. Not necessarily a fire alarm. It will display the area or zone in alarm, which you work there, you know where that area is, and you can then let the fire brigade know exactly how to get to that area. You need to leave somebody at the panel and coordinate the emergency, because the front entrance is where the firers will enter from, and they need to meet somebody to liaise with. Usually it's the emergency coordinator, the person in the white vest. Okay, so let's now talk about our panel itself. A green light, which is what we all want to see on our panel, means everything's working fine. Everything's fine. That's fine. Okay, red light doesn't mean there's a fire, there's a fire alarm. An orange or amber light could be an area that's isolated. In other words, the alarm isn't turned on in that area or zone because there could be some work carried out. It could be faulty equipment. So that's the 3 colours we'll have on our fire panel. When the alarm sounds, what's the first thing you should do? Wherever you are in the building, check your immediate area. Check around where you're working, and if there's no fire emergency, stay put, stay where you are, except if you're an emergency coordinator. Your role is to get to that fire panel ASAP. For the rest of the staff, stay where you are, keep an eye on your residents, keep an eye on your area, and await further instructions. And your main fire bell, it'll be just outside your front door or your entrance. It'll be on the wall, and it's a very loud bell. And a lot of them are electronic, so it'll be very loud. As a matter of fact, when they come and test your equipment, they isolate that bell so it doesn't disturb people on the outside. But usually when your alarm's going, that will be on. Do not even look at the panel and try to turn it off. It's an offence. Leave it on for the simple reason, could be in the middle of the night, could be fog around, the emergency services may not have been there before, they will listen for that bell, because that bell tells them that's the address where the alarm's gone off, but also it'll direct them to the front door, the area where they need to enter the building, and that's where your main fire panel will be. We go across to our next page, and we have what information we're going to tell the emergency services. Once again, the adrenaline could take over. Deep breath helps you open your mind. You're ringing the number, could be 000, might be an extra 0. If the phones aren't working for whatever reason, could be the internet's down, you need to call 112 on a mobile. 112 is the one on a mobile, and it'll put you through to emergency services. Who are we going to call? Fire brigade. Which emergency service? Fire brigade. What's the name of the facility? Tell them the name of your facility. What's the postal address? Give them the address. The closest cross street, and even give them your name so they've got a reference point. Now, like I said, most of that information is the front of your flip chart, which is next to your phone. Other than smoke, what other things can set off your smoke alarms? Your smoke alarms are very sensitive. The smoke alarms will be located in your bedrooms, your living areas, your hallways, and your open areas. So they're the ones that detect not only smoke, but things like aerosol or talcum powder, or even steam. So they are very sensitive, they're photoelectric, they will sense, and your alarm will go off. Even if you know what set off the alarm, it could be something as simple as an insect inside there, you still need to call the fire brigade. So that will come across as a false alarm, and the best news for the fire brigade when they get there is we'll show you the detector, and I can tell you exactly what caused the alarm, and they will then proceed to reset your fire panel so that everything's working. So, having said that, knowing how sensitive these photoelectric smoke alarms are, areas like laundries, bathrooms, even pan rooms with the vapours. The alarm itself is not a smoke alarm, it's called a heat alarm. The ones in the kitchen, heat alarm. Can you imagine if we had a smoke alarm in the kitchen, it'd be going off all the time? They look the same, but they operate differently. They operate on the air temperature. In other words, in those hot areas I just mentioned, if the temperature gets to 68.5 degrees Celsius, which is quite hot, okay, that will set off the alarm as well. Even in your roof space where there's a lot of dust, they will be heat detectors. Okay, this next page you need to fill out yourself. I'll take your word for it. Obviously you've got to fill it out. It's got a lot of information regards your facility. And the last page, as you know, when I'm there, we'll go through a stage 2 evacuation exercise. So stages of evacuation. Stage 1, outside the room. We've bought time. We've removed people from the dangerous area and shut the door. Stage 2, using our priority of evacuation, we've removed residents and people from one zone into the next zone. How do we know where the next zone is? It'll have the smoke doors which are closed. We have a priority of evacuation, if you remember, ambulant, semi-ambulant, non-ambulant and resistive. And we'll also have our stage 3 evacuation for something like a bomb threat or a major emergency like an earthquake. Very major in that, yes, we have to get people outside. But there's no reason whatsoever for you to start removing people outside the building in a fire emergency. Your building is constructed in such a way that if there is a fire anywhere in the building, it's got safety features which prevent the spread of fire into other areas. If wherever you have a fire or smoke door underneath, up in the roof space, you'll have a barrier to stop the fire from spreading if it gets up there. So a very, very safe building you live in. So using this sheet here, I need you to simulate a stage 2 evacuation exercise. Imagine that the alarm's just gone off at, let's say, 12 AM. It'd take a minute or two for the emergency coordinator or even a staff member who's close by to get to the panel. You need to call the fire brigade, give them the information. Daytime, plenty of staff, communicate with the staff in that area and they can investigate using an extinguisher as their firefighting equipment, at least 2 people in the team. They may come across a small fire in a room, remove the people, shut the door, lay the extinguisher down, pause and then contact your emergency coordinator or the person in charge back at the panel. Let them know what's going on. If it's no fire, great. If there is, then proceed to carry out a stage 2 evacuation. Remove people from the surrounding rooms into the next compartment. By then, the fire brigade will turn up. If there's anybody unaccounted for in that area, they may have been resistive or non-compliant, let them know straight away. By the time the fire brigade get there, you'll also have the emergency coordinator, the white vest is on. The fire brigade realise that they will use that as their point of contact. They'll want to know, is everybody accounted for? You'll produce the document that not only shows them the residents, that it's all up to date, that accounts for your residents. You have a staff list you could get from somewhere. Everywhere's different, but you should have a staff list which tells us the staff who are on duty at that point in time. You'll have a visitor's sign in, a contractor sign in, a volunteer sign. We're accounting for everybody in the building. This here in real time, as you know, takes us about 6-7 minutes to do. And that 6 or 7 minutes, or the first few minutes of a fire emergency, are the most critical. So good luck with filling this out. I'm sure that for those who have met me before, there's a lot of things that will jog your memory, which I've just said, but at the same time, we need to all be on the same page. So please fill them out carefully. If there's something you're not sure of, go and see your educator. They will be given one of these with the answers. Ooh, how about that? And they can steer you in the right direction. So that completes our all staff mandatory training. Also, we need to now go one step further with our emergency coordinators. Now, what's an emergency coordinator? In New South Wales Health policy document, or New South Wales Health PD 2010_24, could be a question, that one. Okay, it states that every healthcare facility, so we're talking nursing homes, we're talking hospitals, public, private medical centres, even day procedure clinics must do all staff fire training at least once per calendar year, and every 12 months train up extra people to become emergency coordinators. Now, an emergency coordinator is the person who, with the training, has been assigned to take charge in an emergency. Take charge. The first thing you do when you come across an emergency or it's reported to you is to take charge. As simple as maybe putting on your white vest, heading towards the fire panel, maybe leading the fire crew, or more importantly, letting the fire brigade know exactly what's going on. You'll identify yourself with the white vest, which we suggest you keep in your emergency evacuation pack near the fire panel or wherever you keep it. Put it on. That identifies you not only to the fire brigade or the emergency services, to other people that this person looks like they're in charge. I could be visiting a hospital, never come across an emergency coordinator, and I see an alarm go off, I hear an alarm go off, and someone in a white vest approaches me. They look like they're in charge, which is exactly what you are. So you need to fill out this assessment. It needs to be sent back to me, the same as the other ones, and the questions are quite straightforward. A lot of them are fairly much the same as the other one, except they're more pointed, more direct, more specific for your role. And you'll have questions like, when an on-site emergency is reported to you, what do you immediately do? Take charge, put on your vest, investigate. Things like CO2 extinguishers may be safely used on types of fire involving everything except an oil fire. Once again, there's some equipment, there's procedures, there's incident report forms. You'll have them on your computer, or they could be hard copy. Every incident needs a report. There's information that need to go on that report. The type of emergency, the date that it happened, the time that it occurred, who was involved in the emergency, what was the emergency, were any people injured or maybe taken to hospital. So that incident report is very important. As soon as you can after the incident, fill that in, because it is a legal document and could be brought up in coroner's case, and that